This is Glow in the Dark Radio. The science fiction podcast with original independent science fiction written and performed by Mike Luoma, with music by Kevin MacLeod. The Vatican Assassin Trilogy and The Adventures of Alibi Jones by Mike Luoma are available in ebook, trade paperback, and audiobook wherever you find your books online. Get links and details at glowinthedarkradio.com. This is the Science Fiction Podcast, Glow in the Dark Radio. I'm your host, your writer and reader, Mike Luoma, and we have part 1 of Chapter 12 coming up on this episode. I've divided Chapter 12 into 2 parts because it's really 2 very different feelings, 2 very different moods. I'm surprised I left it as 1 chapter originally, so I'm dividing it in 2, and just about down the middle, too. It's about 23 minutes long, so about 12 minutes each section. And then chapter 13 is like almost a half hour long, so I'm going to cut that in 2 as well. But we have part 1 of chapter 12 of Alibi Jones on the way. Following those alien kidnappers led Alibi Jones, Kit the cat-like Dakhur, and Piccolo, who turned out to be a sort of scumbag bounty hunter, to an unknown outpost in old Eldred space. They found Eldred, an alien race that's supposed to be dead and gone, working for an apparent human, Dmitri Masakov. Now, Masakov and his Eldred were apparently operating on, vivisecting, really, Eldred and human victims in a facility at the outpost. They discovered Eldred ships filled with human kidnap victims in underground hangars and set them free, calling in the Solar Alliance, the safe forces, to pick up the survivors. They also found Piccolo's supposed sister, Katie. She was okay, hadn't yet been harmed, but she wasn't Piccolo's sister. She was his bounty for some guy named Lavalor. Katie asked to leave with Alibi Jones and company, and they agreed. But before they go, Alibi needs to go visit his teacher once again. His kidnapped friend, whose trail brought him here. She wasn't as lucky as Katie. That's coming up in part 1 of chapter 12, ahead on Glow in the Dark Radio. I want to say a big thank you to patrons who help make this all happen. And if you want to find out more about becoming a patron, please go to patreon.com/glowinthedarkradio. The link is in the show notes. You can find out more about supporting the show for $2, $5, or $10 a month. You can find out about getting episodes early. I think this one's going to be in people's hands early, patrons' hands early. Patrons also just got a new short story, previously unreleased short story called A Jar, that I wrote for a Balticon writing contest a few years ago and never really put out there. So, patrons now have that at the $5 and $10 a month level. So if you want to get in on stuff like that, if you want to become a patron, just head to patreon.com/glowinthedarkradio. Well, as I was mentioning last week too, my paperbacks are now back at Barnes & Noble. Very happy to see that. If you don't want to get them there, they are also at Amazon. Books A Million has them. Walmart. I'm surprised. Walmart carries my paperbacks. Who knew? Bookshop.org is another place you can find them, and they tend to be kind of humanitarian. Bookshop.org donates proceeds to local bookstores to try to keep them afloat in the internet age. So there's a few different places you can get my paperbacks. And I have a new comic book coming out that'll be available in print from a different source entirely, from indieplanet.com when it comes. But yes, the Alibi Jones Chronological Omnibus will be in print soon and available for you through the folks at Kablam Printing in their store, indieplanet.com. It's available digitally right now. You can get it at Amazon and at drivethroughcomics.com. That's all for book news. We're going to get into part 1 of chapter 12 of Alibi Jones next on Glow in the Dark Radio.
The Flash Pulp Podcast. 3 to 10 minutes of fiction brought to you thrice weekly. Now it's 3 apocalypses in one.
Yeah!
Suffering from tough, stuck-on humans? Well, 20 hellish hours of suffocation in the all-encompassing web of Karwick the Spider God will get them right out. Too many brains lying around? The ravenous mouths surrounding zombie-fighting Ruby will quickly clean those up. Nosy neighbors? Infect them with the murder plague, and watch as they dissolve into paranoid maniacs bent on the preemptive assassination of their friends and family. Why stop at one end of the world when you can have all three? You can find them all at flashpulp.com or search for them on iTunes.
Now here's part 1 of chapter 12 of the novel Alibi Jones, part of the Adventures of Alibi Jones Chronological Omnibus on Glow in the Dark Radio.
I need to go back to that other building before we go back to the ship, Alibi tells the others as they ride up to ground level. There's something I have to do. Maybe we should trash the place, Piccolo suggests with an evil grin. Maybe we shouldn't, Alibi barks back at him. The grin fades fast. The elevator door opens. They walk out into the small building. Safe will clean things up here, Alibi says. Maybe Anita can get the project scientist to comb through the stuff in that lab. Find out what Masakov was doing. Plus, who knows what sort of biohazards might be packed away on the shelves in there? He looks over at Piccolo. You sure you want to start trashing a place like that? Piccolo drops his head. I didn't think about the biohazards and stuff, he says in a small voice, defeated. Let's just go. Alibi opens the transport and climbs up into the driver's seat. The other three climb in. They seal the transport and head out through the airlock, back toward the lab building. Who's Masakov? Katie asks as they travel. Dmitri Masakov? Alibi tries. She shakes her head, no. That's the name of your doctor, according to the safe info base, Alibi tries to explain. She still looks puzzled. The mad scientist guy? Oh, Katie exclaims, getting it. That's not what he called himself. Must have used an alias, Alibi figures. Ashimeth, Katie says. He called himself Ashimeth. At least I think that's what he was saying. Hard to tell, he talked funny. They reach the lab building. Alibi opens the building's airlock from inside the transport. The vehicle rolls back into the vast operating room, filled with bizarre equipment and the human and Eldred victims of Masakov's experimentation. Alibi unseals the transport and jumps down out of it. He starts to walk off, but then turns back. This shouldn't take too long, he tells the three still inside the transport. I'll be right back. Katie unseals her side of the transport and hops out. She walks over to Alibi. I want to come with you, she says to Alibi in a loud whisper. I don't trust Piccolo, and the Catman gives me the creeps. Alibi sighs. At least she seems to trust me, but I don't want any company for this. I really wanted to go alone, he tells her. I'm sure you'll be fine here by the transport. I won't be gone long, he says, trying to reassure her. She isn't hearing it. Please, she pleads. I'll stay out of your way, whatever it is you're doing. I can even help if you need it, she offers. Alibi stares at her. Okay, so I'll just stay out of the way. Please? Huh, she doesn't seem like the clingy type. He gives in. Okay, come on, he says. We're wasting time. Katie brightens. She follows Alibi in silence, a satisfied smirk on her face. Alibi is not smiling. His steps feel leaden as each brings him closer to doing something no one should ever have to do. And now he has the girl along. Last thing he wanted. She's lightened up a little. He realizes she's younger than he thought. Probably only 18 or 19. Would have guessed around my age, mid-20s or so earlier. It's something about those gray eyes. She's aged beyond her years. Feels like I'm about to get a lot older, too. They walk past rows of operating tables, past the open-chested, vivisected Eldred. They pass by humans surgically opened up in cruel fashion, and walk by the man Alibi saw before with his groin and brain pan removed. Katie gasps when she sees testicles and part of the man's brain in jars on the shelves next to him. They pass the gaping Hulk, the strong man, still strapped in place against the wall, still drooling and apparently brain dead. Finally, they reach the table on which Miss K lays. She remains strapped to the table, the top of her head open and wired into the machinery behind her. Her wide-open, unseeing eyes dart about chaotically, as if looking for something flying erratically through the air over her head. "Is somebody there, Doctor? Or are you the one from earlier?" she calls out. "Can you hear me? I can't hear myself, but I feel the vibrations. Can you hear me?" Alibi steps up and lays the back of his hand tenderly against her face. "Hello, Miss K," he says softly. "I'm sorry you can't hear me." Katie realizes this is why Alibi wanted to go alone. She backs away, giving Alibi his space. Alibi notices Miss K's left hand twitching at his side. Not twitching, grasping. He puts his left hand into hers. Her fingers curl around his hand and hold his almost too tight for just a moment. She lets go, but suddenly grasps his hand again, only to ease up and repeat the process. He tries to hold on, to let her keep pumping his left hand. He notices his right hand is wet. Still resting against her cheek, his hand has caught her tears. He wishes he could comfort her by stroking her hair, but the way her scalp is cut and folded back makes that impossible. Alibi sighs. He knows what he has to do, but he's not sure how to do it. He looks around. A small, thin pillow sits on a lower shelf nearby. He lowers his hand from her cheek and lets go of Miss K's left hand. "Wait, no, don't go. I can't see you or hear you, but I know you're there. Help me. Please help me. Come back," she cries out. Alibi comes back to her side, the pillow in hand. He grabs her grasping left hand again with his own and holds her smaller hand tight inside of his for a minute or so. "It's me. It's Alibi, Miss K," he says, even though he knows she can't hear him. "I'm so sorry. I wish I found you sooner. I'd wish I found out you were missing sooner. Might have been able to stop this. I'm so sorry." He looks down at the ground, sees the pillow in his hand. His vision blurs. He blinks the tears from his eyes. He lets her left hand go. Alibi does not want to do this. "This isn't fair. She doesn't deserve to be a lab rat. A brilliant woman, great teacher. All she knows, all her experience. Do I even have the right to do this? I didn't do this, Masakov did. Or Ashimeth, or whatever he called himself. I just get stuck cleaning up his mess. Fuck. This is a mess. Can't think about it, just have to..." He lifts the pillow with both hands and brings it down over Miss K's face, covering her nose and mouth. Her head begins moving, shaking back and forth, but he holds the pillow down firmly in place. Katie can't watch. She turns away too quickly and crashes into a gurney she's unknowingly backed herself up against. There, in front of her, covered in dried black blood, lies the body of a young woman, her gut left cut wide open. Ah! Katie screams. Alibi reflexively lets up pressure. Miss K lets out a gasp as she sucks in air past the no longer so firmly pressed pillow. "Sorry," Katie apologizes as she turns back from the horror she's just seen. I'm sorry. She trails off. "Please," Alibi hears Miss K's hoarse voice call up past the pillow. "I can't do this." He lowers the pillow from her face. "Please," she says again. "Don't stop. Please." "I can't." Alibi stands frozen in place, hovering over her, holding the pillow. "Please," she says again. "Make it stop." Alibi pushes the pillow back down over her mouth and nose, and holds it down as firmly as he can. He realizes at some point that tears are streaming down his face. He can't stop, and can't lift his hands to wipe the tears away. Finally, he feels a hand on his shoulder. "Katie, I think she's gone," she says softly. Alibi lifts the pillow. Surprised, he sees a smile on Miss K's now waxen face. She is gone. Alibi and Katie look down on her now restful face. "A friend of yours, huh?" Katie asks. "Yeah, an old friend and teacher." "You were looking for her? That's why you're here with Piccolo, huh?" "Yeah," Alibi says. He looks away from Miss K and Katie, lets the pillow drop from his hands onto the floor. "You did the right thing," Katie tells him, trying to help. He doesn't look at her. "I don't want to talk right now." Alibi walks back towards the transport. Katie follows behind, catching up as they approach the vehicle. "You did the right thing," she says again, stubbornly. "It was what she wanted. I heard her." "Thanks. Thanks for what you're trying to do," he says to her, as he continues to walk away, still not making eye contact. "But it doesn't help. I told you, I don't want to talk right now, okay? Okay?" He says the last word louder than he means to, and Katie shrinks back away from his anger. She pouts as she walks around the transport to get back up and inside. She and Alibi both settle into their seats in silence. "All set?" Piccolo asks, as Alibi straps himself back into the transport's driver's seat. "You, shut up!" Alibi replies. The trip to the ship is made in silence. Alibi broods as he drives the short distance. He's also trying to figure out how they'll get Katie from the transport onto the cruiser ship. The rest of them have EVA suits, but she doesn't, and the transport, although sealed, doesn't have an airlock of its own. He thinks through the problem as the transport hums along. "Maintenance cowl," Alibi says, the first words he or anyone has spoken in the last 10 minutes. "What?" Kid asks. "Maintenance cowl. It's how we'll get her onto the ship," Alibi explains. He can control the cruiser with his wand. He punches in commands as they pull up next to the ship in the transport. The inflatable cowl begins deploying, pushing out around the ship's airlock, puffing up and out from a seam around the door. Alibi maneuvers the transport in next to the ship, so its side door is surrounded by the inflating ring, creating a makeshift airlock. A few more commands on the wand, and the ship's airlock fills with oxygen. When Alibi opens the transport door, their ears pop and it gets harder to breathe. The seal between the cowl and the transport is leaking like a sieve. The vacuum pulls air from the transport. Alibi leans out into the inflated ring and manually pulls it down against the irregular side of the transport, trying to get it to seal all the way. He's working as fast as he can. Their lives depend on it. "Seal, damn you!" It's not perfect, but the seal starts to hold, at least for the time being. He leans through the cowl to open the cruiser's outer airlock door. Air flows into the cowl and the transport, and the pressure stabilizes. "Go ahead," Alibi says to Katie. She climbs over him, out of the transport and into the cruiser ship, followed by Kit, Piccolo, and Alibi. He closes the airlock's outer door and punches commands into the panel next to the door. Alibi steps out of the airlock into the ship's corridor next to Katie, Kit, and Piccolo. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-bam! The other three jump at the sound, like a machine gun going off outside the airlock. Alibi sees their shocked expressions and can't help himself. He smiles. "Explosive bolts. I just blew the cowl off the side of the ship. They're disposable, one-use things," he explains. "Let's go." He turns and heads for the bridge.
That was part 1 of Chapter 12 of Alibi Jones on Glow in the Dark Radio. We'll hear part 2 next week. A grim task now completed. So now we'll see if Alibi Jones and company can actually escape this hellish outpost. We'll find out in part 2 of Chapter 12, coming up on our next episode. Again, a big thank you to patrons. If you want to find out more about becoming a patron, head to patreon.com/glowinthedarkradio. And again, the paperbacks are out there. Newest one too, the new unofficial comic book history for Star-Lord and the Guardians of the Galaxy, the comic book years, with interviews with creators like Chris Claremont and Steve Englehart, and many others. Available now in paperback at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, Walmart, bookshop.org, and other places where you find my paperbacks. And that is all for this week. I'm your host, your writer and reader, Mike Luoma. Thank you again for listening to Glow in the Dark Radio. Glow in the Dark Radio. This podcast presentation is copyright 2023 by Michael F. Luoma and is protected under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License, CC by NCND 4.0. Music by Kevin MacLeod. You can find his work at Incompetech.com. Mike's books are available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook, wherever you find books online. Get links and more details at glowinthedarkradio.com and mikeluoma.com. This has been a presentation of Glow in the Dark Radio.